I moved to a quiet, rural house bordering 50 acres of dense forest because I wanted to get away from people. The house was isolated, surrounded by trees, and far enough from town that I rarely saw anyone. At first, it felt peaceful. Exactly what I needed. The house was old and had been empty for years before I moved in. Above the hallway was a small, unfinished attic with a locked wooden door. The previous owner had never mentioned it, and I never had any reason to open it. At least, not at first. But within 3 weeks of moving in, I started noticing things that didn't make sense. Every morning, something small was different. My backyard gate would be unlatched, even though I remembered locking it. Fresh boot prints appeared in the dirt, leading from the tree line toward my back porch. And sometimes I found small marks around the kitchen window, like someone had been standing there during the night. My first suspicion was my neighbor, Mr. Henderson. He owned the land next to mine and had made it obvious from the beginning that he didn't want me there. He was cold, unfriendly, and whenever I mentioned the strange things happening around my property, he avoided answering. One afternoon, while looking toward the woods, he said something that bothered me. "Some things in those woods are better left alone." I assumed he was just trying to scare me. I became convinced he was sneaking onto my property at night, so I bought a cheap infrared trail camera and mounted it to an oak tree along the property line. If someone was coming into my yard, I was going to find out who. For the first 2 nights, the camera recorded nothing unusual. Just deer walking through the trees, leaves moving in the wind, nothing that explained what I had been seeing. Then, on the 3rd morning, I checked the SD card. One image immediately caught my attention. The timestamp read 3:14 a.m. The camera had been triggered. The picture was a blurry black and white infrared image. At first, I thought it was another animal. Then I noticed the shape standing between 2 pine trees. A person. A tall figure standing completely still. It wasn't Mr. Henderson. The person was barefoot, wearing a dark hoodie and sweatpants, facing my house. I zoomed in, trying to see who it was. Then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The clothes. The hoodie. The sweatpants. They looked exactly like mine. Not similar. Exactly the same. The small tear on the right sleeve. The faded mark near the pocket. They were the same clothes I had worn to bed the night before. I immediately ran to my bedroom. The clothes were still there, folded beside my bed. For several minutes, I just stood there, trying to understand what I was seeing. Then, one thought entered my mind, a thought I didn't want to consider. Had I somehow been outside? Had I been sleepwalking? I had never sleepwalked before, at least not that I knew of. But the more I looked at the image, the more I questioned myself. The figure wasn't acting like an intruder. It wasn't looking around. It wasn't trying to hide. It was simply standing there, looking at my house. I decided to move the camera closer. I mounted it directly on my back porch, pointing toward my bedroom window. That night, I locked every door. I checked every window. I even placed my keys in a different room so I would know if they had been moved. I barely slept. At sunrise, I rushed outside and grabbed the SD card. There were 4 new images, all taken between 3:10 a.m. and 3:25 a.m. The first image showed the figure standing at the edge of my patio. The second showed it standing beside my bedroom window. The third showed its face close to the glass, looking inside. And the fourth image made me stop breathing. The infrared flash had captured the face clearly enough to recognize details. The shape of the face. The figure had turned toward the camera. The infrared flash had captured the face clearly enough to recognize details. The shape of the face. The eyes. The scar above the eyebrow. It looked like me. Not just similar, like a distorted version of myself. But something was wrong. The expression was completely empty. The eyes were open too wide, like someone who knew my face, but didn't know how to be me. I didn't know what to do, so I decided to show the image to Mr. Henderson. I expected him to laugh. But something was wrong. The expression was completely empty. The eyes were open too wide, like someone who knew my face, but didn't know how to be me. I didn't know what to do, so I decided to show the image to Mr. Henderson. I expected him to laugh, or tell me I was imagining things. But the moment he saw the photo, his expression changed. He went completely silent. He looked at the timestamp. Then he looked back at me. What time was this taken? I told him. 3:14 a.m. His face became pale. Then he quietly said, "You need to leave that house." I asked him why. He didn't answer. He just looked toward the woods and said, "Because you're not the first person this has happened to." That night, I decided I wasn't going to sleep. I set up a camera in the living room and sat on the couch facing the hallway. At exactly 3:12 a.m., I heard footsteps. Slow. Bare feet against the wooden floor. Coming from upstairs. From the direction of the attic. I looked toward the hallway. The footsteps stopped. Then something moved in the darkness. I saw myself. Or at least, someone who looked like me. It walked down the stairs slowly. It didn't react to seeing me. It didn't speak. It simply walked past me, picked up my spare key from the table, unlocked the back door, and disappeared into the woods. I stayed frozen until sunrise. When I finally checked the camera recording, I noticed something strange. It walked down the stairs slowly. It didn't react to seeing me. It didn't speak. It simply walked past me, picked up my spare key from the table, unlocked the back door, and disappeared into the woods. I stayed frozen until sunrise. When I finally checked the camera recording, I noticed something strange. The footage showed me sitting on the couch. It showed the figure walking past me. But there was one problem. The camera also captured the hallway behind me. And in the reflection of the glass window, I was standing there, watching myself sleep. I left that house the same day. The police searched the property. They found no footprints leading into the house. No signs of forced entry. Nothing. But they did find one thing. The attic door, which I had never opened since moving in, was unlocked. Inside was another trail camera, still recording. The last image on the memory card was taken at 3:13 a.m. It showed my bedroom, my empty bed, and someone standing beside it, wearing my clothes. So if you ever set up a camera to catch someone breaking into your home, be careful what you discover. Because sometimes the person you are trying to find is the person you never realized you were becoming. My uncle has been a wildlife researcher for over 20 years, monitoring game trails in the deepest, most untouched parts of the Blackwood Ridge. He's seen aggressive bears, packs of wolves, and even poachers moving through areas where most people never go. But 3 months ago, he found a camera that made him remove all of his equipment from the forest forever. He had placed a motion-activated camera 7 miles off the main trail, a location so remote that no human footsteps should have passed through it for months. When he retrieved the SD card during his routine seasonal check, the camera had recorded over 400 blank photos of swaying branches. But the photos captured between November 14th and November 15th told a completely different story. At 11:42 p.m. on November 14th, the first unusual photo was taken. The infrared flash illuminated the surrounding trees, but at the very top of the frame, something was hanging upside down from the high canopy. At first, my uncle thought it was a large fallen branch, or maybe an owl passing close to the lens. But when he zoomed in, the shape didn't make sense. It looked like an unusually long, pale form, almost limb-like, bending at angles he couldn't explain. It wasn't falling. It appeared to be holding on to the thick branches 20 feet above the ground, slowly lowering itself inch by inch. The next photo, taken 3 minutes later, showed the ground directly beneath the camera. Whatever the shape was, it was no longer in the trees. There were no normal footprints in the mud, only deep, dragged marks, as if something had moved across the ground by pulling its weight forward. As if something had moved across the ground by pulling its weight forward. What makes trail cameras terrifying isn't just what they capture, it's the gap between the frames. For 45 minutes, the camera took a photo every 60 seconds. In every image, the unknown figure appeared closer to the tree where the camera was mounted. It didn't damage the camera. It didn't knock it down. It simply moved closer. By 12:30 a.m., the final clear image showed the figure only inches away from the lens. Its surface looked unusually smooth, almost gray like wet stone. There were no clear facial features, only 2 faint reflections where the infrared light caught small indentations on its head. Then, something even stranger happened. The camera continued taking photos for the next 2 hours, but the figure never moved away. It remained there, facing the infrared light. The final photo was taken at 3:01 a.m. The camera angle had changed. It was tilted sideways toward the forest floor. The last image showed the unknown figure moving back toward the trees, disappearing into the darkness above. When my uncle returned to retrieve the camera, he found the heavy-duty metal strap holding it to the tree had been damaged. Not cut, not broken by tools. The steel had been twisted until it gave out. He never reported the incident. He didn't contact the Forest Service. He simply packed away his equipment, locked the SD card somewhere safe, and never returned to that part of the forest again. To this day, he still doesn't know what the camera captured that night. He only knows one thing. Whatever was moving through those woods was something he never wanted to encounter again.